So I'm the building and zoning coordinator. I'm a longtime resident. I'm also on the township development authority.
Great, John, thank you.
My name is Jeff Logan. I'm a township resident, a longtime township resident, and also I serve on the planning commission.
Thank you. Okay, and then Steve, I'll start with you on Zoom. Do you want to introduce yourself and then we'll continue?
I'm Steve Hoffman. I'm with Cumberland County Planning Department.
Mr. Kaiser?
Jim Kaiser, township resident, and I'm also on the Lower Allen Township Rec and Park Board.
Julie?
Hi, I'm Julie Hess. I am a Lower Allen Township resident, and I'm interested in city planning and design. So,
Thank you, Julie. Larry?
Hi, Larry Portzline with Tri-County Regional Planning Commission and also a township resident.
Larry, thank you. Ann?
Hi, I'm Ann Chadwell, Lower Allen Township resident, also bike rider, walker. Just interested to see what you guys are thinking about.
Thank you. Welcome. Did I miss anybody on Zoom? Okay, if not, so if everybody that's in the room, once you have a chance, just sign in the sign-in sheet, and then we have the meeting recorded, so we'll be able to capture who's online, but also to any commentary. And we do have a speaker here with a microphone, so we're hearing everybody clearly. So let's just, Peter, am I advancing the slides here? Making sure I got my technology down right. So for today's agenda, again, this is the introductory session for the workshops that we'll start those this afternoon with a little bit of kind of groupthink, and then on tomorrow is going to be more of the hard work that Peter and Kirsten will be leading for the urban design workshops. We're going to give you a kind of an introduction about the master plan. Hopefully, because you're here today, you've gotten some sense of what the master plan is focused on. I think there was some information that we shared through the township website. Erin and her team communicated information out, so hopefully you've gotten some good, decent, basic background. Give you kind of an overview of the corridor, some of the existing conditions. We also have had inputs from stakeholder interviews, but also a public survey. We got a tremendous response from the survey, which is great. And then corridor visioning helps us to get more kind of hands-on opportunity from you as participants, et cetera. And then finishing up tomorrow night, we'll be doing a public meeting through Zoom again to communicate out some of the ideas that have come out through this workshop. With that, the corridor itself, back in 2017, help me remember, Aaron, when we did the comp plan, the comprehensive plan. So the township in 2017, we helped update the comprehensive plan. Among other recommendations, one area of focus was to take a concentrated look at this corridor particularly. I know the township has recently moved forward with the redevelopment authority with the former Bonton property to do some redevelopment. So that was one of the recommendations. So what the focus is now is to look at the corridor. And the other impetus for this as well is where the US 15 interchange used to be on the corridor has now moved further south. Not too far south, but it's actually made a tremendous change in terms of traffic volume. And then we'll talk about that. So there's opportunity here to take a look at the corridor in its current state, and also looking at it from not just transportation, multimodal transportation, but also land use, and looking at recommendations going forward of how we want to see the corridor in the future, even looking at current land uses that may be underutilized properties in some cases. But also to evaluate how the township is regulating that land use through zoning. I know there's some particular interest of trying to maybe think about the zoning in the township as a whole, but this is a good start to think about it from this corridor perspective. So the corridor runs from the township border with Lemoyne Borough to the east, follow the yellow line alignment, if you will, actually encompasses all of state roads, State Route 2016, and also for the most part, it's State Route 2016 to the east. And then right there at 17th Street, as you come over from Lemoyne Borough, it turns into State Route 2014. And then that continues all the way through past the township building, continues on the corridor under US 15, And then again, for this study purposes, then it terminates at the borough line with Sharmanstown to the west. So that's our study area. The purple shaded areas that you see are within the township, but those are the parcels that we, working with the township staff, decided those will be the parcels that we're going to have sort of shape and influence some of our study analysis. So we kind of had to define the study area from the corridor, but also from the adjacent land use properties. So as you can see too, this area is not just surrounded or terminates with Sharmanstown and Borough of Lemoyne. It also touches upon Borough of Camp Hill, East Pennsboro Township, and Hampton Township. We've communicated with those municipalities and made them aware of this project going on. And if there's any coordination opportunities, I know Sharmanstown Borough is definitely interested, possibly Lemoyne Borough is interested, Hampton Township sees some potential opportunities. So we're also trying to think about the bigger picture here with this project. So again, that corridor is about 2.5 miles. Like we said, it is state-owned roadway. So we do have PennDOT has been involved in this from District 8. Michelle Tarquino, who's the district planner, I think is probably going to participate maybe tomorrow because she's signed up to participate. So we'll have their direct inputs and involvement. But again, on the east side, or excuse me, starting with Simpson Ferry Road, that will be on the west. Those are the actual road names that you might be more familiar with. But for this study, we're calling it the Gettysburg Road corridor. So Simpson Ferry, Gettysburg Road, State Road, Hummel Avenue comprise the entire corridor length. And you can see the specific state routes that are shown there as identified by PennDOT. So again, 2018, I guess, was the right date. Sorry, Aaron, for the comp plan. So again, it recognized an opportunity to support redevelopment along the corridor. Again, some of the objectives is to breathe new life into some of the underutilized properties, unify land uses, and create a welcoming gateway into the township. But I would also mention too, multimodal transportation access is also something that we're focused on with respect to the corridor, and we'll talk about too, because CAT, Capital Area Transit, serves this corridor. And we also, through the work that we've done, recognize that it really is much a heavily used bicycle route because it is a designated state bicycle route that we'll show you here. So the existing uses along the corridor, many of you know it pretty well, quite well, I'm sure, in most cases. But there's a combination of active industrial uses. In fact, the short line railroad crosses here from the Norfolk Southern line to access some of the industrial properties still in use. There's commercial, retail, and residential uses all through the corridor. But as you can know, some of those uses and some of those places are seeing some, maybe some opportunity for improvement, new sidewalks, et cetera. So that's some of the things we're going to talk about. We also know that this segment of the top picture is there close to 17th Street. So that's on the Lemoyne side. As you go under the 581 overpass, you'll approach Carlisle Road intersection just outside the township building. And that's where the 2 lanes then automatically turns into 4 lanes. So we have this combination of what I would call traffic that's well metered, meaning it has a consistent speed, more slower speeds, but as soon as they get to the 4 lane, then it opens up, and then we know the speed limits are, I would say, not abided by as they are on this end. So you have more traffic that's trying to flow faster, et cetera. But we also know too, as we see in the bottom bullet point, with that interchange relocation, since that reconstruction, traffic volumes have declined. And what we mean by that, in 2008, the average average daily traffic volumes were around 24,000. And then now in 2012, based on that data, that was right around the shift between those 2 dates, it dropped to 17,000. It's important to note that the Federal Highway Administration acknowledges that anytime you have a condition where your traffic volumes drop below 20,000, that's a perfect opportunity to think about some type of complete streets or road diet to integrate other types of modal uses, pedestrian, bicycle, into that type of network. So that's one thing that we already see FHWA has based on their studies and guidance, is kind of acknowledging that our focus for this corridor isn't just about land use, but about thinking about the corridor in terms of multimodal transportation. So with that point, the 3rd and 4th bullets, it is a designated bicycle route J2. We know, in fact, Julie, I think sorry if it's Julie or Ann. Julie was the bicyclist. Is that right, Julie? Or Ann? Sorry. But we also talked to the Harrisburg Bicycle Club. They've had some really good inputs to this. They've also given us great indication that we've checked with Tri-County too. They don't have specific survey data for the corridor on bicycle users, but I know the Bicycle Club does know that they have a number of their constituents, if they will, that actually use the corridor. And we actually have survey responses back from users that actually use it not just for recreation, they're actually using it for transportation to get to and from work. Some of the industrial properties or entry-level jobs, those workers or some of them actually need bicycle transportation to get to work. Also, 2 CAT routes B and E also service the corridor as well. So from a zoning standpoint, the is industrial zone properties, zone, and then finally the orange is the general commercial zone. So that's going to be the other thing we're going to think about is that's the current zoning. We know from township staff that there's some opportunities for improvement, how those zoning districts work and some of the regulations and standards that have to be looked at. But that's going to be helpful too to think about through this process to get your ideas on future land use. What do you want to see that corridor in the next 10, 20 years, if you will? And from a land use perspective, but also a transportation perspective, we know, for example, again, the township's investing in the former Bonton property, so that we know there's some good reinvestment opportunities that are nearby, but specifically along the corridor, we want to start to think about some of those opportunities as well. So in terms of bicycle connectivity, walkability, so again, we did mention that the corridor is designated bicycle PA Route J2. The yellow areas on the screen that you see in the background picture, those are within the corridor. Those are the actual sidewalks. So what you see in yellow are the actual where sidewalks exist. You can see that there's a lot of disconnectivity within that sidewalk network. And very limited sidewalk connectivity along the actual corridor itself. A little bit there next to the town, just outside the township building. And I think the township did put some of that sidewalk network in to actually facilitate access from the township building, the park, further down. And I think that was also to accommodate when Walmart went in. Is that right, Aaron? Okay, so there was some logic to it of trying to make those connections to some of those new shopping opportunities. So to think about that, that's what we want to try to think about too, multimodal connections. There's really no bike amenities outside of wide shoulders. So we know at the 4-lane section, there's some pretty decent shoulder opportunities there for bicycle lanes possibly. So to start to think about where bicycle lanes could be put, and maybe awfully too, think about, do we have enough capacity, or is there enough capacity in the roadway network or over capacity, meaning that there's extra lanes? Is there an opportunity to think about any actual dedicated lane for bicycle routes or pedestrian routes? So a good example, North Front Street in Harrisburg, up by, if you go up by our building where we're located, they took a portion of Front Street, which is a 4-lane highway, and actually designated a lane separation just for bicycle and pedestrians. I think it's about maybe 10 feet, 11 feet wide. It's pretty heavily used right along the river. So it's not out of the ordinary. I think here in the West Shore, there's a project where the Market Street comes into Lemoyne. They're also considering moving forward with a dedicated lane for bicycle travel. So that's a pretty tight bottleneck coming in from the West Shore area, where the coming across the river bridge from Harrisburg into Lemoyne through what they call the bottleneck. So if they can do it there, there might be some opportunities, precedents there locally within PennDOT District H area that we might be able to think about how can we apply those examples to a possibility of looking at it in this corridor. So again, just throwing out ideas to start thinking, having the juices start to flow and give us some feedback on what we're trying to achieve here through the next day and a half. So some of the safety issues that we've identified too in terms of crash statistics, in total, this data has been evaluated from the period of 2015 through 2019. So again, this is after the interchange has been relocated to the Lower Allen Drive interchange. There's a total of 117 crashes, 1 fatal crash, 3 suspected serious crashes, and 4 pedestrian crashes. So there are conflicts This data for this type of state road with volume is typical, so it's not out of the ordinary. But anytime you have a fatal or any type of pedestrian involved crashes, we know there's a safety issue that we need to be concerned about. Where you see the red circles or what we call kind of the heat areas, the hot areas. Yes, sir. Yeah, so 2015, if you remember the previous slide, I think it was around 2010-ish, 2011 is when the interchange was relocated. So the previous slide that we had about the traffic volumes, we had the data point of 2008, 2012, and we saw that there was a decrease, and that decrease was directly attributed to the interchange being relocated. So what we're showing here is definitely after the interchange was relocated. We can get that information. That would be good to do a comparison. So we definitely can get that. That shouldn't be too hard to gather for that, but it's a good question. Yeah, we looked at it from the after the fact to say that, hey, now in our current state, how are things operating today? Because that was more germane that this is what we're working with in terms of safety issues. But it also tells you that has safety improved? I would venture a guess, possibly yes, but I don't know for sure because the volumes have come down, right? So trying to make a correlation, but I don't want to be venture too much of a guess there. But what we're showing in the red dots, you also see some other green areas. Each of those green kind of images along the corridor are actually where all of those 117 crashes are culminated during that period. But what you see where the concentration of those incidents are at those particular intersections. So 17th Street, if we start in Lemoyne's Borough side, that's 17th and 18th Street, that little connection there. If we go further down, right outside the township building is Carlisle Road. So that's where it changes from a 2 to 4 lane. A lot of conflict in terms of movements. And is the next interchange is close to where actually Gettysburg Road veers off and travels out towards behind Trindle and the Pizza Grill. And then Lower Allen Drive are those 4 intersections. So you can see where the main issues are, as you would think they were at the intersection points. If you go back to the land use, we have at Hartsdale, we have residential that are in that area too. So thinking about the pedestrian movements, if we need to have people trying to access. So again, we have the background data on all of this, but just to give you a summary of what's happening, that's what we wanted to present. So we also had one-on-one interviews with property and business owners along the corridor. So we had conducted those interviews back in April timeframe, I think, Aaron. I'm losing track of time here real quick. And then we just recently have a public survey that I believe is still out through this urban design workshop period, but already we have 670 responses. That number actually rivals the amount of responses we got for the whole township's comprehensive plan, which I think was around 700, Aaron, at the time. That's a really good response. I mean, that is a phenomenal response to think about just this segment of the township. So that's impressive. And it's given us some really good feedback too. And again, where we're at today, this is all part of the public input process to help inform what you as residents and constituents want to see this corridor to be in the future. Let's just say a 10 or 20-year horizon, because some of the projects might be more capital intensive, et cetera, to make those changes and those transformations. Plus, if there's any additional land use changes, that probably would take some time too. To think about it. But again, what we're trying to think about is how the township, how the corridor looks today, what the community would like to see the corridor look like in the future and operate in the future. So I just wanted to share some of the survey findings. Again, of those 670 responses, 72% are township residents, which is great. It tells us that these responses are largely coming from residents, but it's also important too that we have the balance, almost the entire balance is also telling us that they work in the corridor. So you've got people that not just live here, they actually use the corridor and navigate the corridor. And from that, 63 of the participants visit the corridor daily or weekly for shopping, work, what have you. And predominantly they use and navigate the corridor through driving. We do have a number of respondents, all small but very important. 55 respondents walk the corridor and 62 respondents bike the corridor. So again, that's a sampling. I'm sure there's more potentially out there that actually use the corridor. And on a more frequent basis, you can say 28 individuals walk and bike daily or weekly. There's also 13 users that responded that used transit, CAT. And then 65, we say the majority of the respondents indicate they feel the corridor needs safety improvements, which is indicative of the information that we just presented on traffic safety. Those improvements focused on bicycle and pedestrian safety. And then again, if those improvements would be made, I think there's an indication the respondents said that they would very likely or somewhat likely to walk or bike the corridor in the future. So it's kind of think about, that there is concerns about the current corridor state of high traffic volumes, if you will, speed factor, safety issues that could be improved upon. So generally, participants support aesthetic improvements, the overall appearance, new uses to include restaurants, parks and recreation, retail included, improvements to include sidewalks, crosswalks, bike lanes, and lighting. What participants in general do not support is new industrial, office, or healthcare uses. Also, they don't support new residential uses. Yeah, John, I think you're talking about healthcare. Is that the one? Or
I just thought if you don't support residential, industrial, commercial, what uses do you support?
right. So that'll be helpful to start when we start envisioning the corridor. It's kind of our response to, okay, let's think about this in a bigger picture. New residential uses, removing traffic lanes or blinking light. So I think what we're getting at is I think that they possibly see the corridor as being developed today, that the development is contributing to what we see in terms of aesthetics. It's contributing to the safety issues. There's probably a play there, in terms of if you have more development coming in or new development, it might maybe potentially exacerbate any issues that are currently there. So again, it's how you interpret that information is obviously key. But that's why we wanted to do these urban design workshops, to start to have more kind of groupthink and also physical drawing that Peter and Kirsten will start to do here a little bit this afternoon, but also especially tomorrow. So the survey, the next couple of slides kind of get a little bit more of the details of the survey. But so we tried to help the survey respondents envision the corridor in sections. So the western portion, central portion, and eastern portion, I think you can see how we segmented those out to give, and that's how the responses came back in. So I'll just kind of walk through these in more expedient fashion. But again, very interested or somewhat interested respondents in terms of restaurants, retail, parks and rec, future service businesses are generally supported. So you're going to think about any, shops, offices, et cetera, that might be more business service related, shopping related, might be supported, restaurant related. And you can see the eastern portion of the corridor had lower level of consensus. So that, again, think about the corridor from left to right. You're going from Sharmanstown to Lemoyne, traveling through the township as you read those responses, western, central, and eastern. So I won't read off, but I think you can visually see what the responses are in terms of what people are very interested or somewhat interested. This again shows what they're not interested in. Just let you kind of take that slide in based on the data. Again, those are raw number counts. So you're seeing the whole numbers there by responses. So again, I think you can gather from that the industrial business, there's a lot of active industrial uses, so possibly truck traffic might be what they're thinking of as not conducive to trying to mix in with residential uses and other uses. If you're trying to think about it from a multimodal access, that might be the conflict that they're worried about, right? Existing transportation safety, walking and biking, we can see that it definitely needs improvement. Bus stops, improvement. Driving safety, okay, I think there's kind of a mixed bag on, but it might be coming down to, again, is that more related where they feel safer on the 2-lane portion, or they don't feel as safe on the 4-lane portion, or vice versa, depending on their driver skills. I think you can see where there's conflicts out along 17th and 18th Street. Those intersections are a little tough to navigate, and then further down, maybe if you have some better turning radius, et cetera, might be that perception where it's more safe in that area. Transportation improvements that would be helpful, very helpful or somewhat helpful. So these discuss street lighting, sidewalks and crosswalks, lighting under the bridge itself, bike lane there in the central, eastern, Also on that side too is the 581 bridge. So again, those areas of trying to think about navigating that at night, you think about some of your users of bicycles, but they're going to different shifts during the wintertime when it's darker longer. You know, they might have to get to work and they just really don't have good visibility along that corridor, or if somebody's walking that corridor, they don't have good visibility, and a perception of maybe safety might be driving some of the lighting issues there too. Transportation's improvements considered not helpful. So just in summary, hesitation to reduce the number of travel lanes. I think there's not a real consensus on how reducing the 4-lane section down to maybe 3 lanes, if you will, whatever that number might be from a road diet. I think we need to talk through that. I think what we're hopeful is through this process, we can start to get a kind of a visual perspective. And whatever we come out of this with in terms of transportation types of recommendations, we have traffic engineers that work with District 8 on a regular basis, PennDOT District 8. We're planning, we always take these ideas back and test them with our engineers to make sure there's some feasibility in terms of, yes, it meets design standards. This is feasible from that design perspective. And obviously cost is another perspective. We really try to ground truth these ideas and get experts in from a bicycle perspective, if we have bicycle improvements, to make sure that what we're recommending on the back end of this project actually have some level of feasibility that the township should be able to be confident to start to move this forward. You know, there is a response to maintain the existing blinking emergency traffic signal. They don't want it removed out here at the township building. But that's I know even trying to ingress and exit, it's a little bit of a challenge because of the 4 lanes. So I know I experienced that, especially because I live in South Middleton Township. I want to turn left. I want to get home that way. So that's a little bit challenging. But otherwise, respondents generally, it seems there's a general support of a range of improvements. So I think there's an opportunity to explore all types of ideas through this workshop. So just to wrap up here, I'm going to turn it to Peter and Kirsten, because Peter's going to be out going live from the field, much to Aaron's concern that he might be a safety hazard, but we trust he'll be fine. So master plan timeline, the township, we started this project back in March. So we have a pretty expedient timeline to move this to completion. We started to identify, collect data, identify existing issues. That was largely through the stakeholder interviews that we did and other discussions we had with the township. Also the survey work that we've done, and then identify potential improvements. That's where we're at right now in month 3, which is here in May. So we're right on schedule to have these workshops, and then we'll move forward with actually taking these ideas and putting them into a master plan that will be backed up with an implementation strategy. So we'll identify a vision, goals, and recommendations to move forward from a land use and transportation perspective. And then we regularly hold meetings with township staff on a monthly basis. And then we'll be having more public meetings to unveil kind of the final draft product with the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners here, probably in July, August timeframe scheduled. So the public will have a chance to see the whole document. It'll be out on the website, et cetera, and kind of get the whole inputs brought into it. So one last thing, just to kind of, So before I forget doing this, and I'll turn it to Kirsten, is that aside from today, tomorrow is really the bread and butter of the urban design workshops. So Kirsten and Peter are going to be facilitating several sessions throughout the day. We encourage, if you have neighbors, friends, or people that said, oh, I didn't know about it, you didn't get the message, tell them to come on in. It could be a drop-in session. Peter and Kirsten are actively working, designing, et cetera, but we really want people's input as much as possible. So tell folks, don't worry about showing up on time, stop in, learn what's going on. And then tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock, we'll have a final public presentation, basically to unveil what was talked about and show the great work that Peter and Kirsten will be doing, and with your ideas and inputs on that. So Peter or Kirsten, I'm going to turn it to you. I guess you can know how to take it from here, right?
Yeah, thanks, Troy. No, you could just leave that. So what we're going to do throughout this afternoon is, it is a long corridor, and Troy's given a good overview of all of the existing conditions and some of the analysis that's already been done. But we've got Peter who's out in the field right now, and we're going to go through and look at the 3 different areas along this corridor where the character changes, the context changes a bit. And we're going to start to do some interactive sessions with you all here in the room and on Zoom, and just start to kind of note down some of your ideas and think through what are the constraints. We're going to be looking at this in 3D, and I'm going to pass this over to Peter to start sharing his screen and introducing us from the ground level view. So I'll let them stay. We thought it might rain today, and it looks like it may be. Everyone can be comfortable and dry inside, while Peter is the one who gets rained on.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
Hi, Kirsten. Can you see my screen?
We can see your screen, Peter.
Okay, great. So what we were trying to do, oh, sorry. Can you see my screen now? Yes. So what we're trying to do, and I hope you guys can hear me well, but what we're trying to do is to show you some of the existing conditions that actually either hinder or assist in some of the things that we have been talking about. You know, I mean, when you think about walkability, you can imagine how, you know, it's a fantastic idea, except when you have a sidewalk that pretty much ends like this here. And where I'm at right now, it's actually right under the overpass that you see here. Troy mentioned a couple of things, and I'm going to just walk over here under the underpass so we see a little bit more. But Troy mentioned some of the ideas, of course, is up lighting or down lighting from the underpass. And as you can see right now, there's absolutely no lighting here. So you can imagine in the middle of the night that it would not be inviting whatsoever for pedestrians to come in. One thing to keep in mind, and sorry, that was an extra loud car just passed by. But one thing to keep in mind in general is that whenever you have very wide sidewalks and the type of lane width that we have here, you know, it actually stops people from wanting to bike. And as I'm saying that, I could actually see a bicyclist on the road here. So it's good to see that. But the one thing that we have realized that I've noticed is that all the cars that are coming off the highway here, you know, they automatically make a right turn. And of course, they have a different speed than the other lane that is coming from westbound. Can you hear me okay so far?
We can hear you, Peter. And can you, since
Okay.
this is the helpful part of being able to see in 3D, and really dive into the human scale. How big do you think that shoulder is? What's the width that you've got there?
That's exactly where I'm walking to right now, because what I've done is I parked the car here, but I did a quick measurement of the shoulders here, and this is the shoulder that they have. Mind this is actually the shoulder that you see in a highway, which is 12-foot shoulder, and that is in case a car breaks down. You know, you're supposed to get off and have the shoulder for emergency, but the reality is that this is not supposed to be a highway. This is supposed to be a local street, right? For pedestrian and bicyclists and stuff. And so even if we were to get the same 12-foot, and I did a quick measurement of the travel lanes that you have here. And I don't know if you guys can see this little dash line there, but that's actually where an 11-foot travel lane will be. So meaning that this travel lanes here, each of them are much bigger than needs to be. So you're looking at about 13-foot shoulder on this one side that doesn't have a sidewalk. And you could easily envision that this 13 feet, you could have a 2-lane bike lane with a 2-foot buffer on that side. And that is using the existing 16 pavement that you already have here in place. Does that make sense?
And Peter, did you happen to get a measure on the other side? There was a sidewalk and a smaller shoulder?
Yeah, so the sidewalk on the other side is actually about 5 feet. And the shoulder, I try to measure it, but I think it's about 4 or 5 feet. But all in all, you can see how, you know, the way that this part of the corridor, and again, the reason why I'm out here is because I want to show you the existing condition as it is at the moment right now. But what you're going to see is that the same corridor changes behavior further down as we go eastward. Not only do we not have a center turning lane, I believe, but we also have here 5 travel lanes versus 2 that happen further down. But also we have introduction of sidewalk. And the other thing to keep in mind whenever it comes to urbanism is, you know, if you want cars to go slower, what you want to do, kind of like not like that guy there, but what you want to do is you want to allow for buildings to come up closer to the street, and that creates the perception that there's height, there's danger, so cars slow down. But here, for example, you see that cars are going quite fast because the lanes are wide and there's also not anything around it. And then the other thing that we talked about earlier was the possibility for creating a really great retention area or green infrastructure along this whole entire edge here. Troy, is this the area that we were talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, so you can see how there's a lot of big space here basically that could potentially, and you can see that it slopes down toward it. So actually in terms of the topography, it's already kind of built into it. There's obviously a ditch that I'm not gonna go there because I'm petrified by snakes, but you can see that there is a potential of actually creating a really great park area that could be inviting and also as a resting point between, the municipality, everything that's happening on the east, then have a nice green resting point here. And then, how is it that we're gonna be able to redo the underpass so that it makes it a lot more safer for pedestrians to go and be able to go shopping grocery at the other side of the underpass.
Peter, can I just interject there on that green space? The township has a stormwater authority, and they're looking for opportunities to add projects to for BNP and get credits for it. So that's PennDOT owned right of way, but we talked before with Becky, who's the stormwater manager here for the authority, and there might be an opportunity to talk to PennDOT to think about some type of stormwater BNP, reclaim that area, because you really can't use it for development. It is PennDOT right away, but there might be an opportunity to partner with PennDOT to think about a joint partnership project for stormwater management and MS4 with the Chesapeake Bay. So just a little bit more insights on that.
That's also a great thing to think about and a great opportunity to look into as we also think about, what is this corridor? How can it better serve the community and how can it better contribute to connecting the community from a transportation standpoint and a visual standpoint and an identity standpoint? This is a major route going through the township, but the overpass there really divides it into two different areas. And as people are driving through, do they know where they are? Do they know what businesses are nearby? Are they directed into the community or towards destinations? Or are they not? You can see what it looks like now. And there's not a whole lot of visual direction or visual cues to lead you into the nearby, lead you into the community or let you know what there is nearby. So maybe we want to think about how can this be a better front door, a better main corridor that indicates that is a more more contributing street that indicates where you are and what is there nearby to direct people in and through the community. What kind of identity do you want it to have?
Yeah, in a way.
All right, Peter, we're glad that you stayed safe. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, in a way, this is your gateway into your community for a lot of people that are getting off the highway. So this is what they see in terms of the gateway to your community. And you can see it's not very descriptive. So it is something to keep in mind. So I'm going to log off real quick. And Kirsten, just go ahead and share your screen. And then I'm going to be with you guys in like about 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm. All right, so what we're going to do now, again, for those in the room and those who are on Zoom, we've looked at some of these 3D images, and I'm going to bring those back up on my screen, some photos that I took, and start to ask you guys what your thoughts were, and we can start to note down some of the issues that we identified and opportunities and what we think of some of those. Go ahead and. Takes just a couple seconds to start the broadcast. Hopefully you guys can all see my screen now. So again, Peter was down here by the overpass, and we looked around at what those conditions are like underneath. And obviously, you can see a large area like this looking at the map. We're not looking at it in an enormous amount of detail. So this is why we wanted to dive in and look in a 3D. So we looked at some photos here. For example, we were looking at that underpass. We were thinking about the lighting and the connectivity and the sidewalk and the bike lane and the opportunities with the green space on the side and the width of the road. And want to open it up to again, those in the room and those who are on Zoom, you please do feel free to be conversational, speak up and share your ideas. What did you guys think looking at this space? Is this a space that you would feel comfortable walking in?
I think, I had not thought about the uplighting, in fact, how dark that space actually is. So, I would think uplighting of the overpass, seems like a really good idea, to make that more lighting for bicycle or walk. It's interesting, on the other side of the street, you have a bicycler heading west, along the shoulder. Here over on the other side of the street, if you are traveling east to west, to get through that overpass, it's really tricky there because of there's a kind of an entrance ramp, which is always difficult if you're on a bike or walking, walking this, it's a tough thing to navigate. So it would kind of make sense to see a bicycler on the other side of the street, although that's not the ideal side.
Are you saying to have the bicyclist on the opposite side from where we saw him?
Yeah, I mean, if you are heading east to west, if I'm on a bike, I'm gonna go with traffic flow to, walk the road across. Ramp. West, east. That's just. I think what's the two there? That's there, and white, and also looks nice with shoulder.
The sidewalk, looks like it's poorly maintained, not the best condition. The weeds coming up and the concrete needs to be maintained. If it's not maintained, people won't use it or it'll end up with one of these on.
Aaron, and Brad, who's responsible? Is that township responsible? It's PennDOT sidewalk, so.
Is the PennDOT sidewalk? Does that look like it's wide enough? Do we ever see people, what's your sense of how often you see people using that sidewalk, or whether you would feel comfortable walking under that? Let's say that there was more lighting. Does the sidewalk itself, does that feel safe next to the volume and the speed of the traffic next to it? On the other side. Despite the fact that there's no sidewalk on the other side? Yes. So that tells you something. That tells you that people would prefer to be further away from the cars, even if there is, even if there's not a formal sidewalk. If they can walk further away from the vehicles, that's probably why they're walking over there.
Residential areas on this side of Route 15, I more often see people walking Hartsdale Drive to get to Walmart, Capital City Mall, and destinations than I see walking. I don't see a lot of people walking along Gettysburg, Simpson Ferry.
So they're taking the Hartsdale Drive route to get to the mall or that part of where you have those amenities versus
Right,
here.
because we have Spring Lake right here on both sides of the railroad, and Linden Gardens and Preston Manor, the developments between here and Route 15. They tend to gravitate up to Hartsdale Drive and follow Hartsdale Drive. From what I observed, rather than going straight through into Hampton Township and near Trinity High School, there are some destinations there, but I think most destinations are more along Hartsdale.
Okay. So we have to think about that end of the corridor. If you would make land use improvements, then what would be the gravitational pull for?
I see more bicycles here than I see on Hartsdale.
And we just physically saw that today, right?
Do we think there would be a use for bicycles on both sides of the road, but with directions of bicycles that go with the flow of traffic? So bicycles going one direction on one side of the road and going the other direction on the other side of the road, or having a separated, more protected multi-use path?
They had sidewalk on one side and a bike lane on the other. It would allow for the two not to intermix, and probably be safer for those walking or jogging.
So maybe keeping the pedestrians and the bicyclists each in their own space for, you know, the slower walkers, and then the bicyclists to have a designated space where they can get through more quickly, but be protected from the cars. That might be a good thing to look into. Does seem like it's a very well-used corridor for bicycles, even without a lot of infrastructure. So
I spent a lot of time on the Harrisburg Greenbelt, and I'm more concerned about pedestrians being separated from bicyclists at times. So at Dick's point, I thought was a good one.
I have no objection to spending money to create bike lanes if they're going to be used. I see the city of Harrisburg, or PennDOT, whichever, that it spent all the money to create a bike lane from Division Street south. And I have yet to see a bicycle in that lane, although it's been there, I guess, about 2 years. The bikes seem to be back on the pedestrian path in the green area between the curb line and the river.
I think you're right, Dick. I just saw that today. There was and this is not just a casual cyclist. He had the saddlebags and everything, and he was on the walking path.
Yeah, I don't see anybody using that bike lane, yet the city gave up a traffic lane to create it.
And here it looks like we have the opportunity on the median, because we just physically saw someone use that as a bike lane here when Peter was out in the field, right?
So that would be a question that I have. There are the shoulder spaces on both sides of the road. Is that used? Is it needed in this location for things like pull-offs and for car use, or can it be more pedestrian and more bike space as protected space for both of those other users? In areas with wide shoulders, we do often have you do often need a shoulder for cars to be able to pull off. But in a setting like this, there are lots of places to do that already. You're in an urban setting. You have blocks regularly. You have side streets to turn onto. Is there a need for those? Do you see cars using that space besides Peter parking there today, which we probably would not recommend doing on a regular basis? Could that space be converted to protected and designated spaces for other modes, so that everyone's got their a pedestrian space that's clearly demarcated and a bike space that's clearly demarcated, and not have that available for cars anymore?
Yes, because the car breaks down and it's really broken down, they can still pull in and block it.
Yeah, and I think it was a bygone of the past era when this was a ramp area. So when Peter said, this is what you see on the side of a highway, it's because that was a highway. It's just not anymore, because now everyone uses the interchange. So it moved. So I think there is an opportunity there.
I think that's a really great opportunity to think about what kind of character you want the street to have. That's a significant amount of space. If we have 12 feet on this side and about 4 feet on the other side, and that's without narrowing the lanes at all. And like Peter said, the lanes we could look at potentially narrowing some of those lanes also. They're wider than is required for this type and classification and speed of road. But even without touching those driving lanes, 12 feet and 4 feet, that's a good solid amount of feet that we'll look at exploring. We'll get more into the design tomorrow, and I'm starting to visualize what that space could look like and what else could be in it. Want to go back to the map here really quickly. Peter's on his way to his next site, but we want to look at just overall, what are the areas in here that we want to think about if we, it can be difficult to think about specific changes in the context of what it is now, right? It might be difficult to think of people wanting to walk there. Why would you need a sidewalk? Nobody walks there. There's nothing to walk to. But we want to think about this holistically, because there are opportunities for other things around the corridor to also change. There are opportunities to think about what might happen with that AMC cinema site in the future. All the shops around Michael's and the pizza the pizza shop and the new development that's happened in the Bonton site, and then obviously the school. It's great to have more walkability around a school. And then we talked about the potential use and redevelopment of this green space and potentially putting in some kind of stormwater management, retention, and beautifying that and making it more of a park-like space. You have a lot of opportunities that for the frontage and the land uses along this corridor to change in the coming years. And so what would you like this area to be? And what is the, you know, how could that connectivity continue to be improved? If we have a nice green space here, for example, and sidewalks that lead you through shopping areas, make that a little bit more visible to see sidewalks that lead you through shopping areas and lead you over to the school, sidewalks along this corridor.
So
We do
just
know that, go ahead, Peter.
no, I was just gonna say that I'm at the next place, so we could jump on whenever you guys are ready, but go ahead.
Yeah, we're just getting ready for you, Peter. We're just wrapping up here, just looking at, again, we're going to get into more detail with starting to design these areas tomorrow, but we want to have this ground reference in our minds so we can jump right into it in the morning.
Hi, this is Commissioner Kutz. If I may make a comment.
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner.
So I think in my mind, obviously we have the big development authority project coming up that we hope will attract a lot of people from the mall, maybe foot traffic, with the restaurants and whatnot from the high school and the surrounding residential. So you had asked what we think would be what we'd like to see there. I think is exactly that, is pedestrian access and sidewalks so that we can have a commercial center to the township. You know, we even have our police department separated as a separate zone, the Hartsdale Capital City Mall corridor, because it is the central commercial corridor of the township. So I think part of what can help us make that area more attractive and improve people going to those businesses and whatnot are improving the walkability of it so that someone could park at Michael's and could walk across over to the specialty grocer and other tenants there, but could also walk down to Nikolai's or Pizza Grill and get lunch, or could walk across the mall. So I think for me, you know, I would love for just the walkability aspect of it. Obviously, looking at the pictures that Peter had taken, that area, you know, I don't think it's utilized right now as much by pedestrians, but I think it's because that sidewalk is not in the best shape and doesn't really go anywhere right now. I think in the future, if it's more convenient to get to the specialty grocer that way, that you might see increased pedestrian access. So I think thinking about long-term goals of what to put in, my thought would be to have, if we think bike lanes or extra sidewalks are going to help shuttle people to areas that we hope to redevelop, or areas that might eventually attract more people, I think by having the bike lanes and sidewalks now, that could be an attractive piece to businesses that want to come in and move their businesses to Lower Allen Township. So I definitely agree with the sentiment that, you know, we can really make this corridor an economic and commercial center of the township and really make it something that looks nice and encourages people to see all aspects of it. Thank you.
This is Ann Chadwell. I just wanted to add about the bikes. One reason people don't ride on the Front Street bike path is because it's right on the road. And I feel like as a bicyclist, it really needs a lot of signage, you know, to remind the cars that there are bikers along there. So yeah, I'm one of those people that will choose to ride on the walkway, you know, on the pedestrian, because I just feel it's too risky on the road. So if you did put a bike path, yeah, as your picture's showing there, you would need a lot of signage, a lot of, you know, bright neon colors telling, especially, if you're putting a new bike path, telling the automobiles, reminding them, and even with sidewalks. I don't always feel safe on a sidewalk when cars are whipping by. So bright colors, that kind of thing would be really helpful. Thank you.
That's absolutely, you are absolutely right, spot on. And part of the thing that we need to look at, especially when it comes to a road with the cars at the speed that we see here, is actually creating a buffer. And sometimes they even put, those flexible poles on the side, so that way cars are able to see the difference between the bicycle lane and the travel lane. But yeah, those are exactly what you need in order to make people feel comfortable that they will be able to ride, their bike without getting hit.
Yeah, Peter, I was just going to mention those poles. I think that would be a great idea if what we decide to do is use that for bicycle access. I think that with the traffic going on those speeds, and I know people go well beyond the posted speed limit on Gettysburg Road. I mean, cars going over 50, 55 miles an hour right now. So I think definitely having those flexible poles there on the side to separate the trail would hopefully alleviate some of that concern. And would poles like that be the separation that you're thinking about that would make you feel a little safer riding on a bike path there?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea because it seems fairly simple and fairly reasonable financially. So I like that. I think a bunch of poles, really demarcating the area would be great.
Thank you for those comments. We had another comment here in the room before Peter's gonna take us to the next area, but we do want to hear your comment.
Thank you. This is Jeff Logan. I think also when we talk about sidewalks in the area of Michael's and going over to the specialty grocery store and so forth, even with sidewalks, a lot of times people feel exposed. You're out in the sidewalk and cars are driving by, but I think we should also be incorporating trees as much as possible. One, just to provide shade, but also to have more of a town-like feel versus being out on the highway.
Absolutely spot on. Yes, they help in so many different ways that the benefits are countless. So now we're jumping to our next spot here, and again, I just wanted to share with you guys, and standing here as a single pedestrian. So this is right across from the little park that we have by the municipal building. And I did a quick measurements of the travel lanes here, and the travel lanes here seem to be about 13 feet. Here we have a lot more cars, as you can see, but also, the speed seems to be kind of similar to where we were before. So in this case, it feels like exactly the same that we had originally on the other side, right? The five lanes, the 2 in each direction, plus the turning turning lane. But there's obviously no shoulders. And in this case, what we do have is a sidewalk. I mean, I was standing here as I was listening to the conversation, and I saw 2 people walking by here. Obviously, there's a different type of urbanism that you see here, including some really cute houses that are kind of hidden behind these trees here. But also, you do have a sidewalk here, at least on one side. So that is a little bit more inviting. One thing that I wanted to point out, and this is one of the reasons why it's actually really cool to be able to be here and show you folks, is what's happening here. Well, we have 2 police cars. They're going to make a lot of noise very soon. But if you notice, it only happens when you're doing a workshop live, of course. If you notice, there's the view of all those cars coming in from that direction, and the views of all those cars coming in from that direction. Actually, there's one focal point, and I'm going to show you here. And I hope you guys can see my 3-year-old sidewalk chalk drawing. But basically, you have all the views from this direction, all the views from this direction, and they come to a focal point. And this focal point at the moment, what you see is this. So it's actually one of those places that could contribute to making an essence of the place by making something a little bit more beautiful, a little bit something that actually comes out onto the street and engages the drivers as they're passing by, so they see that there's an essence of the place that is more than just a corridor, which is what we see right now.
Peter, I love that idea. And what comes to mind is either like a welcome to Lower Allen sign there or something, or really just plant it up and put some trees. The area that it reminds me of is on Bridge Street in New Cumberland. They have this little park that's not much bigger than that, but there's just a little sign that says New Cumberland and then a couple of benches and whatnot. And I think it probably would be very cost efficient to do something small with that area just to make it pretty. The only question I have is, and maybe if I think I heard John Eby in the room, he might know this, is that PennDOT owned right of way that we would need to acquire to do something like that?
I believe that island is, because we have problems with grass and weed maintenance there, and we call PennDOT.
So that would be something else we'd need to acquire before being able to do anything with it.
Yeah,
Anytime that we acquire property like that or create property like that, it has to be considered that we are increasing our maintenance budget in the township in order for the township to maintain those properties. And that's something else that has to be considered.
Could this be another stormwater management where you're using stormwater fees to help with the maintenance? I'm throwing that out. Yeah. No? Okay.
We want to keep all of these things in mind. We're trying to set the stage today and get a sense of, all the different opportunities along the corridor, so that as we look at each area in more detail tomorrow, we kind of have started to think about how they connect. But one thing to remember is that sometimes those beautification things, they may require ongoing maintenance, but they can also promote more businesses and bring in, make a more inviting environment for businesses and bring in more tax revenue, and the overall benefit outweighs that minimal cost of maintaining it. So the things to keep in mind, and keep on our list of potentials as we look into these tomorrow.
And the one thing I would point out, Dick, I appreciate the thought about from the budget standpoint. Believe me, I understand that. I think that little strip, obviously the one up across from Becker's up there, right off of 581 would, I think, be a more appropriate stormwater use where the fees could pay for that. I think that little strip of land there could almost be viewed as an extension of the park outside the township building, where, that's not, I wouldn't think it'd be too much more to have the guys who maintain the park just come over and maintain that little strip of land, especially if we don't put too much there. But I think that might be an option as well.
I agree with you. And I wasn't specifically singling out this particular area, but anywhere that we address this problem with that solution along this corridor, we have to keep that in mind.
Good point.
Yeah, good point, Dick.
Right, do we still have Peter with us? Did you have anything else you wanted to show?
No, I'm driving back in my car now to the other point. But yes, that's actually a very good point that was just mentioned. Kirsten was saying, in some cases, and that's why I focus on some of the buildings, some of the cute houses are facing this little green space. But you could imagine that some of these houses here could potentially actually become, there's a hair place here, but next to it could be like a little coffee shop, for example, that they could actually spill out here and use some of the space here that it actually starts to activate the park. And all of a sudden, starting to create a really great synergy between the park and this little piece of land that you could start actually getting funding from the local businesses to maintain, because not only does it make it beautiful, but also it's an amenity for them.
So we also want to be thinking about what are the land uses and the opportunities along the corridor in this area. Again, you've got some residential uses, you've got some commercial uses, And are those all, are there opportunities to add new businesses in there, or to think about what kinds of mixed use or what kinds of new growth might be desired in coming years? And if we do make some changes in this area, what we can think about is what is the, how does that impact the viability of some of those businesses around? Would it be nice to have, we certainly saw in the surveys that there's some desire for more retail and shopping and restaurants. We're looking at an area right here, right by the township building, right by the small park, with access to some residential neighborhoods. Would this be a nice place to have more of those more mixed uses addressing directly onto the street and viewing out onto the park and viewing out onto a potential new terminus to views right here that orients people and indicates this is the center of Lower Allen Township. Do you have any thoughts or comments from our participants in the room or online about potential uses that you'd like to see in this area?
Or elsewhere, I guess further down. And you had mentioned one.
I think right now that space actually accommodates both commercial and industrial. And some of those houses he was pointing out are actually business uses already.
I was anticipating what I thought Eric might say. Further west or south on the street there, we have a mixed use area on the, I guess generally north side of the road that really isn't conducive to mixed uses without combining lots. So that would be an opportunity between 31st Street and Hartsdale Drive in that area for mixed uses also. Because in this area on the, what you say, the right side of the screen is pretty much industrial. So there are large lots with large users. On the left side where he was talking about the hair salon, there are a lot of small properties. So that has the ability and already is mixed uses. The problem we're having is enticing people to do mixed use in the next blocks up toward the first site he stopped at.
Past Hartsdale Drive.
Correct.
Between that, yeah.
Correct.
That's what,
Yeah, there's some vacancy there right now.
I don't know if you can go back to that screen, that overhead. It's down by the, it's on this side of that park area that you, yeah, right where the arrow is pointing, right between, right, yeah, to the left of that. Up further down, yeah.
We're looking east?
Yeah, further east. See where Hartsdale comes? Yeah, so just go beyond that.
Going west.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, so further, just a little bit west. Here's Hartsdale Drive there, and so it's this area.
Yeah, pretty much on the bottom of that corridor,
Yeah, right
you have mixed use development all the way up to Route 15. But it's the north side between Hartsdale Drive and Route 15 where we have residences. There are a few that are converted to commercial, but we have several blocks there that are single family homes that aren't as desirable as single family homes, but they're not easy to convert to business.
And I think that it's interesting because of where you've made the pedestrian improvements with the sidewalk from this location at the township building, connecting with Hartsdale Drive. You can almost see if you'd add more, if the land uses would change, you could get that pedestrian activity to congregate around potential new uses in those blocks. I think is what we're kind of thinking about as a potential opportunity.
Do we see that more on the south side of the street or on both sides of the street?
Well, the south side already has a higher percentage of mixed uses. So what I was referring to was between Hartsdale Drive and Route 15 on the north side is where we don't have much mix till you get right near the old interchange.
We'd like to see it on both sides.
That's an opportunity. We have sidewalk on the south side, north side, don't believe so.
Can I just add a point that's we're talking about mixed use? there's something that I remember when I was doing a workshop kind of like this one many years ago that we had this lady that she was a newspaper writer from England, from British, and she was following us around to try to like document what we do. And then she said, "My God, you urban designers are just like the cavemen, that you go in the cave and you draw the bison, hoping that once you come out, you'll kill it, And so I think that the same thing happens to planners, which my wife is a planner, so I'm not saying anything bad about planners, Aaron, but the same thing also happens to planners, that just because we automatically make something mixed use doesn't mean that it will automatically become mixed use. We also have to set the conditions for that mixed use to actually thrive. And one of them is actually having a sidewalk and street configuration that works with inviting people to be there, so we need to look at, not only the uses, but also the built environment in that sense.
Right, and so some of the things that we'll need to be looking at there, and we'll be asking you about are, what is the building environment? What is the right scale? Can we pull some buildings closer to the street perhaps to make that space feel a little bit more comfortable for pedestrians and comfortable for people to want to come and treat it like a walkable and like a town center kind of environment? And where are the right places to get across the street?
Well, I think this project, if it comes to fruition, we don't need to look at, or we need to look at more than just what the township can do. We also need to get the businesses on board. Some of these properties could make that corridor a lot more enticing if they just had little maintenance and care to them. And I know this is hard to do, but if we're going to be successful, it's something that at least we have to attempt.
Yeah, property maintenance is a good point, especially older, tired businesses, if they're not having the revenue to have the funds to do it, and that's what happens, and things start to go downhill, right, Dick?
Yeah, just to the point about the mixed use on the south side west of Hartsdale Drive, I think you have more successful uses, but I think there's still more vehicular access than pedestrian access, and I think what you need to do is create that welcoming environment where the pedestrians feel safe to come across from the neighborhood to the north. Again, the connection point, the pedestrian connection points. I think that would help that, but then also the sidewalk to complete that on the north side would be beneficial to be able to make those connections to those safe connection points across Gettysburg Pike. Just for a point of data reference, the number of trips split between Simpson Ferry and Gettysburg Road, is that somewhat equal at this point? I'm assuming with the interchange redevelopment that there's more coming Gettysburg Pike.
Yeah, the split really comes down between where Carlisle Road intersects with Gettysburg Road. So that's really start to see a difference between the volumes, because again, now since the interchange has changed, it's kind of a uniform trip count on looking at that picture towards Sharmanstown that way, Jamie. And I think you will see also some change there at Hartsdale Drive. So there's some of those key turnoff points where you could actually see some of the differences.
Yeah, and I think again with the redevelopment project at the Bonton, if some of those future uses are going to be attracting people from the surrounding neighborhoods, I think that's where the importance of the pedestrian and bicycle connections are going to be necessary. So.
We also heard in our previous stop, we heard about a desire for street trees to give it that more of that town character and town feel. Is that something we'd like to see continue down here? Does it make sense to continue that from the overpass area, from connections that get you to the school and to the Bonton site and mixed use and commercial uses, all the way down to here to the township building, to make that a continuous corridor with continuous identity and have street trees? Is that the kind of identity and environment that would be suitable to what we're looking for?
Trees are a little bit problematic there because we do have the overhead wires And we've seen some of the street trees get really butchered when they have to come through and do maintenance. I don't know if you've seen on like up here further on Carlisle Road where they're like half trees. And so I don't want to plant them knowing that they're going to be sacrificed later on. So you'd have to just take precautions as to what kind of plantings you were putting in place. So maybe more shrubbery than trees, but I like the idea of green space being used as a separation for sidewalk or bicycle as opposed to, you know, bollards or something like that.
Jim Kaiser, the township can set up their own ordinances on how the trees can be pruned, and set that for any pruning that's needed for any kind of electrical. So that's the problem. No, but if there's no ordinances, then anyone that works for electric companies, they'll cut the trees any way they can to get them out of the way.
And I have a more radical view. People shouldn't plant large trees under power lines, and they should be butchered so people stop doing it. But that's just me. But if you look at our trees here at the township building, they're shrub trees. They're red buds, they're hawthorns, they're dogwoods. They're appropriate species for the space, and that's what we need to encourage.
Right. And we need, if we're going to put trees in, we have to put trees that, as they mature, are not going to create problems with the buckling of sidewalks and the buckling of curbs and streets.
Correct.
So those are all excellent points, and I think that that's where I'm not a landscape guy by all means, and I definitely don't have a green finger, but there are some tree species that don't grow very much, but you could also, depending on how you maintain or how you plant a tree, and if you plant it within a box, that would be the general shape that the tree itself would be. You know, so the root system tells you it's supposed to be like the same size as the tree up on top. So depending on how you box in the root system, then the tree may grow, may not grow until you are able to keep it much tighter. But that's something that we need a landscape person to probably inform us better.
But that could be some recommendations in terms of your zoning or especially subdivision to make sure that, like an overlay, any types of improvements in terms of green space, you'd have to make sure that the tree or shrub species are approved or native, are of the combination size to address this type of problem, right?
We have that in our subdivision ordinance now.
Okay.
It needs to be more apparent.
There you go. So maybe that's, you know, think about recommendations is how that's being brought to light in terms of emphasis on the importance of that regulation.
We'll also look at the right location and the right place for them. You know, block by block, it may be suitable to have some trees further back from the street or closer to the street to get them outside of where the utility lines are. We're showing here just the particular view that we saw when Peter was giving his tour, but the notes that we're taking down don't necessarily have to be applied in that location. We're just taking down notes, but I think we'll want to look at the right location for where we want landscape as we get into more detail tomorrow, you know, block by block. And I think Peter's at his next location, so we're going to look a little further down, all the way to the east edge of the corridor, and take a look at some of the street conditions that we see there and some of the traffic issues.
Can you see my screen, Kirsten?
Not yet, no.
Okay, so it should be starting soon.
So we see it starting to share.
Okay. Anything?
So it says it's sharing, but it's not showing an image. It's just a Zoom screen. Why don't you tell us where you are? Peter, can you tell us which where you stopped at? Well, now we can't hear him either.
Hopefully it's not at one of the difficult pedestrian intersections.
Can you show it on Google Street View?
I will do that while we're waiting to see if we can get Peter's video back. But this is what we wanted to talk through. As you get down towards that, towards the eastern end of the site, you have some very complicated pedestrian crossings and some complicated geometry. So we wanted to look at some of those geometries and think through where the issues are and where some of the opportunities are. So I will bring up Google Earth and we will dive in and look at Google Earth. And Peter, if we get you back, you just let us know. So going over towards the eastern edge of the site, you've got another underpass. So another area where you know, the urban environment here is a little bit different. You don't have as much solid wall, but it does cross at a very oblique angle, and there's a lot of space. We've got a couple of roads that pass under there, and just a lot of space around this intersection.
Maybe just a quick history lesson here, because Simpson Ferry Road, this used to be the alignment used to go straight underneath what is now the old. Is that correct? Went behind, as I understood from the conversation with.
Well, actually, Hummel Avenue went straight behind the old municipal building and dead ended at that rail spur. And there's a history of an altercation between trolley workers and railroad workers at that location. And then, yeah, State Road coming out of Lemoyne and Camp Hill, your 7th Street Bridge, goes parallel to the railroad track, and that new segment from Hummel, I believe, was probably built when 581 was originally 767 was built. Yeah, that curve at the old municipal building, there was a street coming straight out of Hummel and a street parallel to the railroad, and they didn't meet.
Who owns property under that overpass?
Various property owners. Township property, Milton property.
Well, who owns the property?
It's because we're talking. All right, so Peter, if you start talking, hopefully we'll get your screen up, because it is showing. It's just not showing on the broadcast. It's not showing on the large screen.
Can you see it now? Are you able to see my screen, Kirsten? Hello?
I'm not sure why it's doing this. Peter, we can see your screen on Zoom, but it's not on the shared screen.
Okay. Well, it seems like, of course, the technology stroke prop it's striking at the end of the sharing here. Oh, here we go. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Kirsten? Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So now we're looking at the eastern end of here. And what is interesting for me as an urbanist, you know, having walked around this whole place, is that it feels like you're in like three different worlds altogether, right? Because here you have the really cute buildings, houses, you know, and you have a sidewalk or remnants of a sidewalk in some cases. And then here you have, you know, it's basically a three-lane road. But what you notice is that it's only because it is a turning lane, right lane, but otherwise it's actually a 2-lane that goes under the bridge. Now, this is one of those areas, like as we were talking about, you know, we are saying that you could have trees in some cases, in other cases you can't. Well, one idea would be, what can you do to dress up this highway, this overpass? Because it's definitely not a very inviting scene that you see here. Not only is it not inviting scene, but also you can start to see what happens here in terms of walkability. I mean, you have a sidewalk on the other side that kind of ends around there somewhere. But on this side, there's absolutely no sidewalk. And then it becomes against that no man's land, if you will, that it's really not very inviting whatsoever. Now, just because a highway is here doesn't necessarily mean that it could be something negative. One of the ideas that I've seen in many places, for example, is under the highway. It's a fantastic place to have like a playing fields or basketball courts, for example, that you could build because it's always covered. So, you know, aside from lighting, that again, there's no lighting under this overpass. Aside from lighting, you can see how you could, in theory, have a really great playing field area here for kids, and that becomes a great amenity for the community. But not only that, but you could also see how, in this case, you do have a shoulder on both sides, but there's no sidewalk or anything else. Now, in terms of the geometries of the road, if you notice, it's actually very, very, very long, and it's very straight all the way until it comes to the curve. That means that cars, normally drivers will try to speed up a little bit because there's nothing telling them otherwise. And once they get to the curve, of course, they have to slow down. So that creates a point of conflict in terms of the speed. Plus, on top of that, the other thing to look at here, for example, it's what's happening bent over to the right, to the left over here, that it almost feels like it should be the continuation of the road, should go straight happening there. And I think I'm gonna try to like sketch it out here again, doing one of my sidewalk chalk drawings. But this is what happened to the road right now, right? But really, there's a secondary road that does this. And this is the view that a lot of the cars will actually end up seeing. But what you want to do, for example, here is you want to actually change this so that it feels as if these cars have to go out onto the street rather than just very quickly meandering over. And so, because what happens otherwise is that you end up having this, which is lots and lots of asphalt that is basically no man's land, and definitely, you know, not very conducive for pedestrians and walking.
Does that make it standing there?
Go ahead.
Sorry, Peter. It's amazing as you stand there and we're seeing the space. You see how much asphalt there is, and yet how little of it is actually used as driving lane, or as the primary driving lane. And then you have a large amount that's just kind of, as you said, no man's land. And then there's that other driving lane that blends into that and blends into parking. A really wide amount of space, but the main road itself is a very small portion of that.
It absolutely.
And here we're getting over to the.
Sorry?
Go ahead. No, you first. Go ahead.
No, what I was going to say is that's exactly one of the issues that you end up having sometimes when things are not defined, is that then you end up having more asphalt being built here. And I mean, I don't have a way to measure the width here of the mouth of this little, what actually should be more like an alleyway, because it is going to the back of this building, right? That used to be the municipal building. So, but the mouth of this alleyway is absolutely horrendous. It's humongous, as if it was more for like 18-wheelers or anything bigger than that. But part of the reason is, like you said, there's not only the entrance into the alleyway, but it's also the parking for flinchies. So it's actually it's doing a number of things, but it's not very well defining the space, which is an issue when it comes to driving.
So
and not
Peter,
to mention, of course, yes, go ahead, please.
So I'm just curious, remedying how big that driveway is, because it serves as a driveway for all three of those businesses there. Would you put kind of another grassy median there and just make it into two separate driveways, and you'd have one that goes towards the back of the old municipal building and one that kind of comes in the left side of Flinchie's? Or how would you recommend making that area a little more sightly?
Yeah, so that could be a really good way, especially because, like we talked about it before, the view from all those drivers coming down this way is actually this, which again, this is actually, there's nothing there, right? But imagine you could put like more of a green little island here, for example, that starts to tell those people that it's a physical barrier that tells those people that you have to slow down and make a right turn. But at the same time, they start to crop down the size of this space here. But not only that, but for example, you see this parking here, that's a parking spot. This is not supposed to be a parking spot. This is no man's land. But if you were to get that and curve it over to the street here, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to follow my finger here. But if you were to get that and curve it over to the street, this whole entire space here that I'm standing on should not be paved, should actually be green. So that would make a huge difference, not only for the speed and the vehicles, but also for the view and feel of these businesses that are here, that will have more of a green entrance.
You could picture being in some kind of like outdoor seating area or space that that went alongside that building that's right there, because that's a restaurant of some sort, right? You could imagine that being more usable, functional space with some that spilled into some outdoor areas, rather than necessarily assuming that all of the unused space is just treated as pavement, because that allows cars to use it for whatever they want, and that just creates a lot of conflict points.
We did that on 6th Street in Susquehanna Township. It was a pizza shop restaurant.
And well,
we worked at the pizza shop. Yeah, go ahead, Peter. To create that outdoor space to blend in their parking area, et cetera, and we envisioned of how they could use that outdoor space, that asphalt area, more for outdoor seating, et cetera, but also blend it in with the actual roadway. Go ahead, Peter. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. That's excellent. And that's a very good point. And then there's the other part of here. You know, this is actually the parking for that restaurant across the street. But imagine trying to cross this after you had a couple of beers. That could be kind of interesting. Plus, you know, these columns actually, they do block the view of the cars coming from the left. So again, this is one of those areas that becomes no man's land that could actually potentially be something much bigger than what it is here. And considering that this is only a 2-lane road, meaning that it's not high capacity, you could potentially even have on-street parking, for example, along the road here, and have the rest of it here to become some other uses other than the parking, or have a really nice liner so that it actually encloses the space here if you still want to have, you know, the storage that you have back here.
So 2 things I would add. First, I would love to see some sort of conversation with business owners, you know, at Flinchies, to see what they think, you know, say, hey, if we want to put a little median in here, how would that affect your business and how people use it? I can say when I go to Flinchies, you're just kind of driving across the middle of it and hoping to pick the right spot. So I think that's definitely somewhere to look at. My other question would be, if you were to put some sort of basketball court or something underneath the overpass there, what would be involved with the process of that, number one? And number two, when you do things like that under an overpass, does that increase any level of, you know, potential criminal activity, or is that it's another place police have to patrol? Right now it's kind of no man's land, but do we create an opportunity to have a dark space that might invite activities that would involve, you know, police needing to monitor if we would use the area underneath there for that purpose?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think, Aaron, you've provided, PennDOT has some type of air rights.
There's fee simple property rights underneath, subject to aerial easements for that viaduct.
So would that preclude any type of, I mean, right now there's storage being used, but if you wanted to convert it into some type of park use, would that preclude that opportunity?
I don't think so. That's a PennDOT question.
Yeah, they have to be able to get there for maintenance. So
Okay.
like you couldn't fence it off or do something like that.
Right. But if it would be a park-owned facility by the township, could there be it'd be something we could possibly explore, I guess, is what it's not precluded from that air easement or ground lease type of.
Definitely have the lighting.
Right, yep, I think we did think about the lighting would be the issue for sure, Dick.
And pigeons.
And pigeons, right. Because they roost on the
And you
the
have to
decking.
have their permission to put anything on the
Okay. So I think, Commissioner, that's a great question. Hopefully that helps answer your question in part there with that.
Yeah, so essentially we can do something. We just have to be mindful of PennDOT having access to the aerial easement.
You know, sorry, I'm just rejoining here, but in Pittsburgh, actually, we do have several parks that are immediately under the 376, which is a PennDOT road. And yes, as long as it's an area, I mean, you could do a basketball court and all you need is just the asphalt. And of course, where the poles are going to be, the hoops are going to be on both sides. So that does not preclude from anybody actually going underneath. Plus, you're not going to put a lot of greenery because it will die because it doesn't get a lot of water. So those are all the different things that we have to maintain in the design. But yes, you could, in theory, actually do a really nice park. And to answer your question, sir, the idea would be to actually put lighting, because once you put light from hanging from a top down to the bottom, which is something that PennDOT does a lot in a lot of their bridges, most of their bridges, then it will make it safer for anybody, and it will be safer than what you have, the condition that you have now.
That's excellent, Peter. Thank you for that. That is very encouraging. And this might be a conversation to hash out later if we decide to do a park here. But you could do outdoor like bolted down ping pong, or I've seen cornhole that's bolted into the ground. But you could really make it some sort of we have a lot of basketball and tennis courts in the township, but something unique. Ping pong came to mind, and cornhole came to mind. I don't know if make it kind of a lawn game type thing, but obviously I think that's something to hash out later what the details would be. I just want to throw that out there.
That actually, it's an excellent point, because the other thing that we tend to forget whenever we say park is we automatically think of basketball, baseball, football, soccer. But the reality is you also have other type of people that would like to go to a park and have a more of a passive type of gaming, but also they have their children, right? So you could also do a children park underneath the highway that actually makes it very safe, but also protected from the road or the rain.
Absolutely. And chess, for that matter, would be, do we have is there I mean, you always see in the movie people playing chess at parks. So that could be an idea as well. I'm just trying to think outside the box a little bit. I know there's a lot of space down there. Some of the space near the detailing shop is, a runoff collection area over there. So I don't know how much of that is really in play, but certainly that kind of what you referred to as storage, where there's just extra parking across from Flinchie's, would certainly be a good candidate for it. And I'm sure, it would attract people to go to the park and then go to the restaurant. So that would certainly bring some business in for the township.
The growing sport in the area right now is pickleball. And I don't know that Lower Allen has any pickleball courts that I'm aware of, but maybe we do.
Yeah, Dick, we just did them this year. Actually, just about a month ago, I think we finished 4 of them at Wasp Park.
Oh, great.
But we have talked about putting more in, depending on how those get used. So that's, in fact, there was a question in one of our residential Facebook groups today about pickleball. So that's another thing that could certainly be another place for pickleball.
Well, I'm going to confess, I don't know what a pickleball court or board looks like,
Very
but
small tennis
we'll
court.
look into that, and I'll just label
Very small tennis court.
board.
And possibly Flinchie's might, there's a lot of restaurants and places like Flinchie's, that sports clubs, bars that have, bocce ball, or they have cornhole tournaments and things like that they might be able to take advantage of. So that would be, I think that would be perfect. It would be interesting. Maybe we were talking about maybe trying to engage Flinchie's like we did the restaurant owner on 6th Street, just to maybe pop in tomorrow if we had time, if the manager's there, and just see if they'd have a chance to stop in and just chat about this and get some ideas to.
Around lunchtime.
Lunchtime, yes.
Hey, here's one other opportunity or question that we could do. What about spaces for food trucks? What if we put 3 or 4 spaces there that are, ready for food trucks to line up? And that way, they can reserve those spaces or come by. So if we could have a park area and then also have a couple areas for food trucks, I think that could attract some people. The only concern I would have then if we would do that would be was probably a shortage of parking. So I think that's the one thing to be mindful of if we do too much with that space is there's, I don't know how much capacity that area has to add additional spaces.
Yeah, and the minute that, and you're completely correct, sir, about, the shortage of parking, but I think that the minute we have a problem with shortage of parking means that we've been very successful at creating a place that is very inviting and people coming. And at that point, all of those places actually start picking up, the amount of people that come to those restaurants and businesses and stuff, and things start to flip around. So, yeah, but you're completely correct, sir.
It would also promote the whole pedestrian corridor and strengthening that. So if there's not enough parking, I feel like you don't necessarily have to continue to add more parking. You just make the corridor more inviting to pedestrians.
Yep. Absolutely spot on. Absolutely spot on. And here's one opportunity that we have, which is one of the areas that when we looked at, we're like, oh my God, that looks like an eyesore, right? It's like the worst thing of the whole entire, except for like the closed down businesses, which there aren't many of those, but this is like a real bad eyesore. But in reality, now we're flipping it on its head and making almost like the center of the community, because now it has so many different uses. You can imagine a playing field and all stuff, plus the food trucks. I mean, that would be a great place for people to come and visit.
Don't think you're going to get Lynchball to cede land to public use for competing food trucks next to his restaurant.
Yes,
does Flinchy, John, does Flinchy's own that area across there now?
They own what was township property on the north side toward the old railroad tracks. The view you're looking at toward Highland Gardens and Highland Park, that's owned by the various owners on that side of the road.
Right. Okay. Yeah. There's also a lot of times that, if they have, for example, burgers, then maybe somebody has tacos, and all of a sudden it's a better relationship because you have more offering, meaning more families will be able to come because kids may not like tacos and the other one's the burgers, that's exactly what happened in my family. So, but all of a sudden having more offering, it actually brings more people at that point. So, but you're completely correct. Most businesses are afraid. They're like, I don't want any competition, but yeah. Oh.
I don't know. I do know he makes rental income from boats, trailers, and RVs under the viaduct.
So the other thing I would suggest, if we end up getting some sort of use out of this underpass here, would be pedestrian access coming from the township building past Brewhouse and all the way. Basically, that corridor between Brewhouse and Flinchy's really isn't too walkable, and I think that would be if we get use out of this space in going with the continuity theme and the connectivity theme, to be able to connect that area through the industrial use there and back into this kind of mixed use area.
Yeah.
You definitely want to connect with Highland Park and Highland Estates because those would be your walkable customers to a play area and a restaurant.
Absolutely. Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point, John.
And ultimately what ends up happening too is whenever you start having this little special moments, some of those bigger buildings that at the moment they're like factory and stuff, they end up dying off and things are moved somewhere else. But then those buildings are the ones that get retrofitted into the really cool New York style loft and all stuff, which it brings a whole different set of issues. But you could see how that's what ends up driving the change over time for a place like this. I mean, a lot of the solution, aside from what we can do on the under the pass, which you could basically just go over there and put asphalt, hang a couple of poles and put some string lights, and they could call it for food truck, you could call it for basketball, you could call it for wherever you want, so you could make it as a mixed use space. Aside from like that is actually quite simple, except we're talking for PennDOT. But aside from that piece, everything else is something that will take time. Right. But that's why we're looking at holistically at a 10, 15 years down the road.
Some of these public improvements could lead to private investment. So they have to, sometimes the private sector needs to see where the public sector's investments are coming in. And they see that, then they see an opportunity like, oh, I now have a kind of a reason to invest into my property.
Exactly. And I forgot, somebody mentioned earlier when I was in the car and I was trying to talk, but I couldn't unmute myself. But somebody mentioned something about being able to talk to the businesses, so that this is actually a joint between the business and the municipality. And whoever that was you? You're spot on. What we have done sometimes is, that 5 or 10%, we say, okay, the municipality is going to do 5%. You business owner do an extra 5%. That's already 10% of improvement, which I start to see a difference. And a 5% for a business could actually be something as small as a planter outside, or a bench, or just cleaning, brushing the sidewalk, So those improvements could be very, very small for them. Municipality put the other 5% and makes a huge difference.
Has the township ever thought about a business improvement district where you take that type of special district, if you will, and it has where the collective ownership of those properties?
Talk to anyone about it.
But it's definitely something. I know in Gettysburg, we helped put one in for Lower Avenue, and that's what they needed. They were a struggling group of enterprises after the visitor center went to Cumberland Township,
Harrisburg knows.
Yep, they have that too, downtown Harrisburg. So it's something to potentially think about, because to Dick's point, you have to have maintenance improvements. So again, just throwing it out there is something to contemplate. It's not something that we're right now advocating, because we don't have a basis other than there needs to be some type of revenue to help with this.
Well, tell me about the anomaly, because Peter, I think, mentioned the kind of quaint homes. That's the only part of the village of White Hill that's left. You had a train station, you had, rows of duplexes and so forth. And I think L.B. Smith gobbled a lot of those up for their factory and their parking lots. So that's what's left of it. So it's a real anomaly, because it seems totally out of place. So it's like an oasis of houses that are like from a bygone area that they're not being improved, but they're not being converted either. How would you deal with some anomaly like that? Because you don't want to just tear them all down and
Right now, are they all rental units?
I don't think so.
Okay, they're all owner
It's a
occupied.
mix. It's a mix.
A mix of so. Yeah, it comes down to property maintenance, code enforcement, et cetera. Who maintains the sidewalk. So obviously the property owners are responsible for, I think, maintaining their respective portion of the sidewalk. So what ends up happening, you have these little chunks of sidewalk that have separate responsibility for maintenance. So maybe that's where the township starts to work with the property owners. And like Peter said, we'll start to help with the improvements to the sidewalk, but we need to see some property maintenance to occur. We need to say maybe there's some incentives for facade and treatment. So it really comes down to that property maintenance issue in terms of how those properties. And plus, just next door, I think we recognized during our field tour that body shop, or it's a detailer, they made some improvements there. I think we heard there was some issues going on with property maintenance or code enforcement. So there was some improvements made to that. So we could probably talk through some ideas, but it'd be good to understand a little bit more about what's going on. That's kind of like a unique little spot that is kind of unique and kind of quaint. I mean, if it would be improved, and then next to that park, so the idea could.
Transmission shop. Can they have that many cars parked there?
Okay, so you're talking Emery Transmission, which is almost in Lemoyne. They're jam-packed. They might have some cars in the right of way. I don't know.
It's on the other side of the 17th
Right.
Street.
Are we going to go like bit by bit tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay, so that'd be more of like something to detail, because the Lemoyne gateway to Lower Allen is extremely industrial. You have Kessler's, and you got the Hemp Brothers old concrete batch plant that's now a bullpen for construction equipment. So there's not a lot you can do with that unless you change the uses. But as you approach and cross Hummel Avenue, crosses 17 and 18, Hemp Brothers had that little corner with their billboard.
Yep, the sign.
They were just sold. Maybe there's an opportunity to get a gateway.
Yeah, we thought about that. Boy, that would be a great, because you've got because
at least the Highland
Highland Garland, that's what I was thinking of. That's a great corner. I mean, it's like a little village, right? I mean, it used to be a village, right? So you still have that village character that could be potentially revived, and if you got some reinvestment in some of those properties, again, I think it's kind of a give and take, but that would be a great potential.
So, you know, the last time we walked around here, and then I got a call from Leanne, one of our colleagues, and she said, "Oh, come and have coffee with me." And then I went up to Camp Hill, and I look at the buildings in Camp Hill, and I'm like, "Oh my God, that's what these guys can become." You know, like living up on top and then the ground floor retail, which of course it means making some conversion, but that is where, again, like I said earlier, when you start creating a built environment that actually lends itself for more commercial type and walkability and all the stuff, then those ground floor become very, very, very expensive. And then you know, the owner would automatically want to either, you know, get paid like $500 or get paid a lot more money because it could be a nice little cute boutique shop at the historical heart of the community. So it's also thinking a little bit about the architecture because those are quite unique and very, very nice. But again, just Camp Hill right around the street, you know.
There's blocks and blocks of them. If you go east into Lemoyne on
Wow.
Avenue, it's the traditional 1920s big porch twin duplex dwellings.
Yeah,
There's
beautiful.
hundreds of them down there. That's the little remnant that we have.
They're beautiful.
Is the glass shop coming back?
Coming eventually.
Yeah, well, I'll to say that I think it's fantastic. I mean, all the little bones that you have in the community, they're fantastic. Just a matter of with a really plan of how to connect them and you know, sticking to one vision, which is we're going to go for bicycling and pedestrian and families. You have a lot to offer. So, yeah.
We are wrapping up here, and we can take a few more comments. We wanted to just kind of show all the areas that we looked at today and some of the things we talked about are really starting to identify some different areas of activity. And what I've shown here is a 5-minute walk from a couple of these different nodes. So just to get a sense of scale and a sense of how they connect. Tomorrow we will be diving into a bit more detail because again, it's a long corridor. We're gonna look at some of these areas one by one. So we have 3 sessions throughout the day, and we'll look at roughly the west, the central, and then the eastern portion of the site. But throughout all of those, we want to remember the things we talked about today and how they connect, to get a sense of how far apart and how close these are to each other. So those green circles show you roughly a 5-minute walking radius around a central point. And you can think about how some of these might develop into different nodes of activity or different types of uses and different types of reasons why people go and visit those places.
And everybody understands what the 5-minute walk, the magic with the 5-minute walk is, right? It's like this new urbanist concept where that people actually walk 5 minutes as long as there's something cool at the other end. So that's kind of like a little neighborhood node. So that's what she keeps writing. Well, actually, she wrote, oh yes, she wrote node in blue. I can see the blue. But you know, that's why it's a node. Once you create a node, it's something in the middle of that, and then you know that in 5 minutes something else that is also really cool and all that, then people walk those 5 minutes. But also means that you're not going to put people to walk, you know, on a sidewalk next to like 60 mile per hour cars or parking lot, right? So you also have to create the conditions that make that linkage correct. But in theory, you could, in theory, have a lot of people walking up and down the entire corridor as long as you create these nodes.
Now, the first half hour tomorrow morning, is that just a recap of what we did today?
So that's a good question. Tomorrow morning, we have a session starting at 9, which is basically recapping what we did today. Very briefly, you all are welcome. We actually put that it's optional, so you all are welcome to join us at 9 or at 9:30. We knew that not everyone would be able to join us today, and we hope that some people may hear about this and decide, well, this sounds interesting, and decide to join us tomorrow, even if they hadn't initially planned on it. So that 9 to 9:30 session is just a little bit of background information to get any new participants situated. It won't be this long or in depth, but we did want people who couldn't join today to still be able to have a short introduction. And then the design sessions will begin at 9:30. That's also a good question. As Troy mentioned earlier, there's no requirement that anyone stay throughout. We hope that people will join when and for whatever length of time they can. If you can't join the entire time, that's fine. Each design session will be different because we'll be looking at each of the 3 areas. So you want to go back to the PowerPoint actually and show that. So each of the 3 design sessions will look at a different area. But the concepts that we'll be talking about will be the same, and we'll be, referring back to the connections with previous ones, and talking about the corridor as the entire corridor and the identity and the improvements that are desired throughout the corridor. So again, if anyone is particularly interested in one specific area and they want to try to attend that session, that's a great thing to do. If anyone cannot stay the whole day, please feel free to jump in and out. Whatever you're able to join us for is wonderful. And then if you're not able to join us for the entire time, but you'd like to see the ideas that came out of it, from 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock, we'll be doing a final presentation. This final presentation is only a recap of this workshop. It's not final project. We'll be continuing to refine ideas and incorporate comments we receive, including at that evening presentation and later. So it's certainly not that everything we present at 6 o'clock tomorrow evening is completely final, but it will be a recap of what came out of that day. So anyone who was not able to join us at all the sessions will see all the ideas that came out of it.
And we have chat messages that we've saved too. So thanks for folks that online that provided information through the chat. So we have that information saved too.
Of course, the township's buying lunch and dinner tomorrow, right?
I'd have to defer to Aaron. We didn't get that memo. Yeah.
There's a nice long break in the middle.
We'll bring deli meats, Stroman bread, and American cheese. How's that? Can't have the bread. Okay. Could have a ham roll up. How's that? Anything, Aaron? Or all right. Well, thank you, everybody. We appreciate your time today. Hopefully, we'll see some of you or most of you tomorrow throughout the day. Thanks.
One thing I didn't get a chance to interject when he was still at the western part. Okay, so you got the mall, you got the redevelopment site, you got the little plaza with the theater in Hampton, and you got restaurants. You got low to middle income wage earners. We need, like housing, or both apartment and affordable housing there.
Well, we talked about with Keith
because that gets into the walkability.
Yeah.
Because some of these workers, they can't get they work when the CAT bus is shut down. They work in nights and weekends and evenings when the CAT bus service stops.
So that's one thing. If you can go to the Google map, because we talked to Keith Metz about, there's a lot of excess parking in front of the Aldi and movie theater on the side. So when we did the interview with Keith Metz, that's Hampton Township property.
Except for the Lower Allen Diner, right?
Except for I guess the diner.
That's in Hampton. It was the Camp Hill Diner.
Right.
Now it's the Lower Allen Diner. It's in neither. It's in Hampton.
So I guess
Call it the Hampton Diner.
part of that idea, John, to think about that, that's where we thought, and we asked Keith, would they be receptive to contemplating any type of use of that out parcel area? He said, absolutely. So that's what we got to explore tomorrow. Is there an opportunity, even though it's not Lower Allen, you're still benefiting from that very thought, is you might have some mixed use development that, or maybe some low rise, because you can still want to see where the theater is at, but you can make some use of a lot of that excess parking as well.
I'm just saying, like our Rana Villa development that was built in the 20s and 30s and 40s, that was bisected by Route 15 when it moved from Gettysburg Road to current 15. It's underwhelming. And then you've got some office buildings there that are underutilized. So that general area near the mall where it'd be very walkable to walk to your employment, walk to get your groceries, walk to the entertainment.
Yeah, what is going on with the office building? Maybe that's what you're talking about. It's right at
The two that are left were at the interchange.
Yeah, it's the one that,
You should ask our Campbell
isn't that one up for sale? Or rent?
Lease.
So, I mean, it's probably not, I mean, that could probably be converted or reused as apartments, right?
Because we actually, when corridor one
quarter one was not a, it was a realistic dream. We created overlay zoning for a transit-oriented development there. And it didn't happen.
You know what I mean? It's the,
Yeah.
because that is.
But that's kind of like that Hampton Lower Allen area there, that blends into Shermanstown, is on
From an office use, that building's very old.
Well, and I was looking at that one, the node that's over the Bonton Center is, there needs to be some more residential in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, to make the commercial spaces viable, sustainable, you know, just, again, the walkability. Yeah, some residential certainly should be part of that mixed use consideration, not just mixed commercial. Yeah. Mixed use with the residential as well. Yeah, it's absolutely. Aaron